Hello, I'm going to talk about the 17th harmonic. In vibrational astrology, we believe that harmonics going up to very high numbers are important, and the prime number harmonics have their own individual quality. So 17 is a prime number, and it has its own individual influence. And to illustrate what the 17th harmonic does, we're going to look at the charts of Janis Joplin, Jimi Hendrix, and Jim Morrison. And the reason we're going to look at these charts is because in another tutorial video, actually a series of tutorial videos on 13 leading rock and roll stars, I suggested in one of those videos that a lot of Janis Joplin's charisma and her intensity on the stage is related to the 17th harmonic. Well, if that's true, then perhaps other musicians who have a similar kind of charisma and intensity would also have a strong 17th harmonic. And of the 13 musicians in that series of videos, two of them came to mind to me. One is Jimi Hendrix and the other is Jim Morrison. What these three people have in common, this is just my subjective impression, is they get on stage and they change. It's like they transform into these channels for this intense energy. I think if we were to meet Jimi Hendrix off stage, or Janis Joplin or Jim Morrison, I think we could sense some kind of charisma and so on. But something happens when they get on stage and that music starts and they get into it. They become like channels for this intense music. So maybe Jimi Hendrix and Jim Morrison also have a strong 17th harmonic. This would be a way of checking out our idea on 17th harmonic to see if it is true. And by the way, if you're curious about this video on the study of rock and roll musicians, I have a link to the first tutorial video in that series if by chance you want to jump over and look at that now. However, you don't need to appreciate what I'm going to be talking about here in this tutorial video. All right, here is the 11th harmonic chart of Janis Joplin, and what we found in that study of the top rock musicians is that the ones who are really intense, like Janis Joplin, Jimi Hendrix, and Jim Morrison, the ones who kind of blow the roof right off the building with this electric, intense rock, typically have a very strong 11th harmonic chart. And Janis Joplin does have a strong 11th harmonic chart, but it doesn't have the exact quality that we would expect. Because here's her 11th harmonic chart. These purple lines indicate midpoint structures in the 11th harmonic chart, where, for example, Venus is directly in between Uranus-Pluto conjunction and Jupiter. Well, Jupiter-Uranus creates bounce, liveliness. So Venus, Jupiter, Uranus usually shows up in people with a bouncy, vibrant, lively feeling. Well, she has that, but she has more than that. She has something a little different from that. This bluesy, intense soulfulness. I wouldn't call it light and bouncy. So it's not exactly the flavor we expect from this pattern. So I mentioned over here on the right that Venus is opposition to Jupiter-Uranus midpoint, 24-minute orb, and Jupiter-Pluto is a 2-minute orb. I've got a typo here. I've got it down here as well. Jupiter-Pluto's 2-minute orb. So they're both very, very strong. This would give enthusiasm and bounce. And there are some other things here. The Pluto opposition Sun-Venus gives charisma. But it still doesn't describe exactly the quality of her music. And one of the amazing things about vibrational astrology is that we can see the details of a person's life. We can get the exact quality. And here it doesn't match perfectly. So where is this bluesiness, this different sort of feeling than a Venus, Jupiter, Uranus in her chart? And what I suggested in the other tutorial video is it's related to these planets that are forming a spreading grand trine it's in late Earth and early air. So we have Neptune at 2 degrees Libra, early air sign, Saturn and Uranus at 0 and 5 degrees Gemini, also early air, and then we have Mercury at 9 degrees of Aquarius, the other air sign, and Sun in late Capricorn. But what makes this powerful is not the Grand Trine. What makes it powerful is the direct midpoints that are involved. So we have, in her birth chart, Uranus is opposite the Sun-Neptune midpoint 25-minute orb. So here's Uranus, there's Sun, there's Neptune, and the way that these planets in this Grand Trine are spread, it works out that Uranus lands almost directly at opposition, the midpoint of Sun and Neptune. Well, Sun, Uranus, and Neptune is the classic three-planet combination for people who are inspired and visionary, out of this world kind of visionary, often inclined to drug use or mysticism or something. They're just sort of loosely in their bodies, and they just want to fly away. And in her case, we had the intense drug use in her life. Also, Neptune opposite Sun, Saturn, only 17-minute orb. So these midpoints that are under half a degree are very, very powerful. This indicates seeking honesty, disinclined to glamour. She was not glamorous. Cutting through, trying to be sincere, dealing with a lot of superficiality or hypocrisy in her life in terms of, say, strong religious tendencies in the semi-rural Texas area where she grew up, but at the same time people are racist. So there's not a real sincerity in terms of what she was seeking. She's trying to cut through all that. So anyway, she's had these very highly sensitive, seeking something new and something inspired, and it pushes her out of the mainstream and into this heavy drug use is the way it ended up for her. It didn't have to be exactly that way, and dropping out of the mainstream of society. So we can see that. The interesting thing we discovered in looking at the harmonic charts is that those 5 planets, let me go back to her natal chart, the 5 planets that get involved in various midpoint structures that I've got shown here are Sun, Mercury, Saturn, Uranus, and Neptune, right? Sun, Mercury, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune. Venus doesn't get involved in the midpoint structures, so it's not as important as the ones that create these midpoint structures. Sun, Mercury, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune. We look at her 17th harmonic chart, and they're all in a T-square. We've got Sun, Mercury, Saturn, Uranus, Neptune, and there are midpoint structures. Those midpoint structures in the natal chart are formed by these 5 planets, and many of them are in aspect to each other. Some are out of orb. For example, the Saturn-Uranus with a 3-degree orb, that's looks like a little bit less than 3-degree orb. That's within orb of the orbs we use in vibrational astrology, which is 4 degrees for squares and 8 degrees for oppositions. So a lot of aspects. So there's a 17 quality to this unstable spiritual yearning quality to her. And what does that do? The theory is that 17th harmonic gives compassion, empathy, and the crossing of cultural boundaries. So, which is exactly what she did. She crossed over from the world that she grew up in into the African American musical heritage, two variations of it, a blues African American style and a jazz style. She bonds with it. It flows right through her. There's a story about her where they're listening to the radio of one of these African American blues singers, and she just starts singing almost identical to her. She crosses that boundary and absorbs this into her and becomes a channel for it. And you think about Sun, Uranus, Neptune, sensitivity, combined with the 17th harmonic chart, 17th harmonic flavor of wanting to step outside the boundaries you're in and experience the story of a different culture, I'm suggesting that this is a big part of what made Janis Joplin the rock star that we know. Well, if that's true, I thought about Jim Morrison, because he got on stage and he changed. I think Jim Morrison, in a way, is a little more controlled, a little more subtle, a little more, it just kind of emanates out of him, not quite as intensely expressive, but he changes, he transforms on the stage. And I thought of Jimi Hendrix, because in studying his biography, we find out that the real Jimi Hendrix evolved quickly to not want to be burning guitars and so on, but he was able to do that. He was able to put on this show. He was able to become that, to express that. So this ability to become more than what you were born with. It's not phony. It's moving into a new storyline, to cross over into a new world and let that flow through you. And people who are able to do that often have 17th harmonic. So I was curious to see if 17th harmonic would show up strong in the charts of Jimi Hendrix and Jim Morrison, and we find out that they do. So I've got written here just what I've said, but to review it, the theory is that the Sun, Uranus, Neptune midpoint and the 17th harmonic pattern in Janis Joplin's chart gives her the ability to fully absorb, feel, participate in, and express the thoughts and feelings of others, to be a kind of channel. And this is what she did. It also involves crossing cultural boundaries. She expressed the heritage of the blues and jazz, African American tradition, but she had white skin. Also, she was bullied and felt alienated, according, as a child, according to the biographies. And this would give her some similarities to the experience of many African Americans being alienated and pushed aside. But she had to move out of her cultural environment to immerse herself in the heritage of this music. That's the 17th harmonic tendency to do that. So what we see is a kind of Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde quality of transformation while playing the music. And I don't mean Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde in the sense of being bad and good, but this ability to become like a different person, for the music to fill you and take you, that the storyline of the music, the performance, it just floods over you, floods through the system of Janis Joplin, and people love it. If you're in the stage, you're witnessing her transforming and being taken with the wave of the music. Okay, so the 17th harmonic pattern gives Janis Joplin the ability to identify with, passionately embody, and channel these feelings during her performances. Okay, now I thought of other people. I've got some typos here, misspelled Bob Dylan's name here, but I mentioned here that people like Bob Dylan and Tori Amos, they're charismatic, they're very intense. It's my impression, and I suspect a lot of you can see what I'm getting at here, that what they express in their music is a little more consistent with their interests, motivations, and concerns, and their personalities when they are not performing. Whereas Joplin, Morrison, and Hendrix undergo this kind of transformation into a different being a little more. Well, you can argue the point. But it was just my impression that I thought that particularly Morrison and Hendrix might have some strong 17th harmonic, and they do. I didn't look at Bob Dylan and Tori Amos and some of the other musicians to see if they might also have strong 17th harmonic. I just looked at these two people, Morrison and Hendrix, to see if they do. And amazingly, they do. They both have extremely strong direct midpoint structures in the natal chart, and by strong I mean less than half a degree, and they are 17th harmonic patterns, which I'll show you in the next slides. It just blew my mind. I mean, I just like, holy moly, I thought they might have some strong 17th harmonic, and they both have direct midpoint structures with less than half a degree orb, and their 17th harmonic patterns. what will happen typically in a chart is many people don't have any direct midpoint structures under a half a degree orb. A lot of people may have one or two or three. The probability that the one or two or three direct midpoint structures you have would be in 17th harmonic is extremely rare. So this does not happen very often, and they both have it. And I think the planets involved also relate to the way that they do things, which I'll talk about in a minute. And also, we can see that actors often have 17th harmonic aspects, because an actor does a similar thing as these performers. They're channeling or transforming themselves, or at least they're able to strongly empathize with the character that they're playing. If they can't get into that character, well, then they can't act. And I mentioned in a study of the first 32 harmonics, which is at this website, astrosoftware.com/harmonicfirst32.pdf. If you go to that website and you look at pages 36 to 38, I talk about the meaning of the 17th harmonic and how it's strong in actors. So we see 17 is very good for counselors as well, that ability to empathize and feel the stories of other people, actors, performers. These are some of the areas where it shows up. And also, the 17th harmonic showed up in a study of the Gauquelin data as well that I conducted back in, I think it was 2006 or 2007. And I have an article about that on our website as well. So this idea of 17th harmonic is showing as being related to acting, shows up in two earlier studies and shows up again here with the strong ability to perform well. So we see here in Jim Morrison's chart, his natal chart, that Jupiter here in the 7th house is directly in between Venus and Saturn. Saturn's over here in the 5th, Venus in the 9th, and it's hard to tell by looking at it, but Jupiter's directly in the middle of Venus and Saturn with a 3-minute orb. Okay, so you see that? Here's Venus up here, Jupiter here, and Saturn down here, and Jupiter's right in the middle. So it's a direct midpoint structure. We look at the 17th harmonic chart, and there it is. Venus, Jupiter, and Saturn, all within about 7 degrees. Amazing. And I think it relates to the quality of Jim Morrison's performances. More controlled. I think he was keenly aware of you might say the choreography or the way he orchestrated these performances to get the best effect. So there you have it. Rich and clear artistic expression and his ability to embody the music, to become one with the music. And here's Jimi Hendrix. We see the same exact kind of thing happening, only the planets are different. Here's Neptune up here near the top of the chart, Sun over here to the left, Moon to the right, and that Neptune is directly in between Sun and Moon with a 13-minute orb. And again, when we look at the 17th harmonic chart, they're all conjunct within 6 degrees. We allow 16-degree orbs for conjunctions in the harmonic chart. And I think this relates to Jimi Hendrix's imagination and vision to move music to a new level. I think we just scratched the surface of it in his short life, and we would have seen more of this had he lived longer. So that it gives you a good idea of some of the research that we've done. 3 research studies: the study on the Gauquelin data, which showed 17th harmonic in actors; the study of the 32 harmonics, also showing 17th harmonic with actors and people that empathize with other cultural traditions than the one they started with. And again, we see it here in the study of musicians, that it fits the data. So, final conclusion: the ability of the 17th harmonic to have empathy, to cross cultural borders, to take an interest in this life story of people outside of one's own immediate environment, can be helpful for actors and entertainers. The person with a strong 17th harmonic pattern can feel the stories and lives of other people so strongly that they can feel a part of it. The 17th harmonic also finds it refreshing to venture beyond the confines of one's own circumstances. They're drawn to move to these new experiences outside of what they happen to grow up with. So the interpretation that I'm giving here of the 17th harmonic is not new, but this research into the rock musician adds some more depth and more appreciation to our understanding of the 17th harmonic. That's it, my friends. Thank you very much for listening. God bless. Namaste.